Welcome back. You here with Goldberg. Today I'll be talking about Trump's mortgage scheme and the future for the Goyim. Now, you've heard a lot of castigation and self-castration on the internet.com. These right-wing males in particular going, "Oh, it wasn't like this under Mustache Man in Germany." I will say one of the beauties of being a Wignat, a trad, a base Muslim or base Christian, you can just lie with impunity on the internet and no one's going to really call you out. Well, if they do, you can just fall back on the Obama supporter model of going, no, no, yes, we can, hope and change. You know, all those brain dead idiots who just keep repeating the same thing, chant warfare, and you'll have plenty of shills backing you even if you are flat out deceiving people. So there's this guy called Uncommon Soyism on Twitter, and he posts about the marriage loan in Nazi Germany. He uses Wikipedia as a source because he's a high IQ white male or possibly Mexican. Well, what he does is he misrepresents this entire program. He says that this line of credit, which would be the equivalent of the government today, you are newlyweds, and so you get this credit card that you can employ at Target and IKEA. And he says, no, this was a mortgage for a house. Utterly false. Under the German regime, they did not go full Gottfried Feder. Hjalmar Schacht said to Mustache Man, that's disaster. You got to see common sense. So you still have home mortgages. They cap the interest at 4.5%, which by today's standards is a little bit on the lower side. By boomer standards is actually very low. But if you look at what people were getting 2010 to 2015 timeframe, it's rather high and usurious, ironically enough. You still have a private banking system. Now they do replace executives through the Aryanization campaign, but the consequence is a shrinking of the total number of banks. And this is akin to, with the great financial crisis, one of the emerging conspiracies was that it had been orchestrated to annihilate local banks, which it did, to the benefit of these larger entities. I should also note, if you wanted to hold on to a bunch of precious metals, the Nazi government wasn't a fan of that. It's because of the foreign exchange crisis, but just keep that in mind if you're some libertarian trad who doesn't trust the dollar and you're all about Bitcoin or gold. Returning to this question of the marriage loan, they say you would have part of it forgiven if you have children, and they wanted the women to get out of the workforce. So this is not a terrible idea in theory. But what happened was the birth rate did spike under this regime, but they never reached the levels that Germany had seen prior to World War I. You could attribute that to losing population, a lot of soul searching because of the carnage. However, you also are undergoing urbanization, and trads don't understand this because they think everyone just has babies because it's a gift from God. The reality is, in rural areas, if you are doing especially subsistence-based agriculture, you need cheap labor. You can't afford to hire hands all the time, and so you need to baku a lot. You need to reproduce. And of course, back in the day, children didn't always live to adulthood. As such, you're going to see this contrast. When people move to cities, housing can be more expensive. They have other things to distract them. You have gradually more education about birth control, and so there's less reason to just have kids as a necessity. And on account of the fact that they got involved in this big war, which you might say was forced upon them, but a multi-front war was not inevitable. This was due to some strategic errors that were made. You have a huge demand for soldiers, and to keep the economy going, they have to import a bunch of foreign laborers. In fact, it was millions of these types. They were, for the most part, Slavs, but they still didn't want them mixing with the German women because they considered them outsiders. And by the end of the war, you have very heavy participation by women in the workforce because they didn't have any other choice. Plus, the losses from the conflict are used as the foundation for an argument that you have to introduce the Gastarbeiter program post-war, which brought in a bunch of Turks to work jobs in the German economy. So, yes, you might have a good scheme, but there can be trade-offs. And these people will go like, oh, the Care Bear is starting wars. But the same ones that will complain about this tribe being involved in conflicts will then turn around and whine that today dating is terrible because there's excess males. And the reality is, yes, a lot of these guys back in the day, if they weren't in a mine, they would be getting killed in some big set piece battle, and that keeps things a little bit more balanced, sad as it might seem. The social provision system in Germany was effective for Germans, although it often came at the expense of Care Bears and other Europeans. When they go into France, they fixed the exchange rate for the Reichsmark to be very advantageous. It was called the Soldatenkredit system, I believe. So these working class soldiers could purchase French goods, food, clothing, furniture, and ship it back home. All of a sudden, their families that were living, very simple lives have access to things they had never known before. But that is not always beneficial to the French economy. And then when they go into Czechoslovakia, of course, they said the Sudeten Germans, they're part of us, they're now going to be citizens of the Reich. This is distinct from actual Czechs or even Germans who said, I identify as Czech, because some of them knew what was coming. While you benefit from Reich citizenship, as far as some of these social programs go, it also means you are now eligible to be conscripted into the army. And many Sudeten Germans were put in the 6th Army. Now, those of you who have studied Operation Barbarossa and the Eastern Campaign, you probably know the fate of that fighting force. To be fair, and when I publish the book, I'm going to incorporate that because people act like the Germans were the only ones who had do not retreat orders. In fact, Stalin did it to destructive effect on the Russians. And Churchill was guilty of that many times throughout his career, getting British soldiers killed because he thought he was some superhero in a romance novel. But it has to be emphasized nonetheless, and these trads won't bother because they're bona fide morons. They don't even have any interest in figuring out what was going on. They just want some way to bludgeon the existing system. I actually don't think the 50-year mortgage would be all that bad. Although, given the fact that it's being orchestrated by American elites, almost certainly it would backfire. But theoretically, if you support a number of people, you slash interest rates, and you have an economy where people can be gainfully employed, it could help. Now, you always get these types, yeah, but look at how much interest you'd pay. And this goes to my question of whether Goyim can even be trusted to manage their own money. You're not supposed to pay all the interest. You're supposed to leverage debts, or you pay it off sooner so you don't get charged all of that. Kind of like when I would talk about credit cards and I would say, pay off the balance in full every single month. And the goys would stream in, no, I want to afford something over time. I don't have delayed gratification ability. And it's like, yeah, are you really shocked that we're in this situation? But that's why we can go into more depth as we proceed with the video to determine, are these people even capable of running their own field of existence? Let's start with the boomers, and I'm not into just wholesale bashing of them, but the most ideal caricatures, the ones who don't want to help out their kids, they bring in the migrants to just keep the market going up, or the housing prices. They are vehemently opposed to any reform of the entitlement structure, and just generally out of touch, disconnected people. Well, that in itself is a major indictment in the sense that you're not trying to help the next generation thrive. If you enjoyed these times of plenty, you should be investing in a balanced budget. You should be trying to ensure that people who are going to, your children or your grandchildren have a leg up. They're not competing with the entire world. They can form families, that sort of thing. But there's much selfishness in the mix. There's this, we don't really care about the long-term consequences as long as our portfolio is green and we can sell our house for a, say, 500-600% return. Next up, we have the Millennials, a generation broadly instructed to just live in the moment, don't settle down early. You've got to soak up culture. And it was the route that quite a few took. So when I mentioned the cartoon Alpha, people got offended because I said, it doesn't take a genius to do John Bogle maxing in the stock market. That advice has been around since the 70s or 80s. But this fellow was like, oh yeah, I got screwed over by the system. It's impossible. I don't join the military and get a disability pension, join a municipal government, just make investments in Bitcoin or stocks. It's too difficult for these high IQ guys. In fact, you notice with the high IQ guys, it's like the brain in a jar. They're always admiring the high IQ as though it's some exhibit behind glass. It's funny because Rehab Room, in one of his videos, mentioned an expose that was done on Home Math, which revealed from his older tweets that he was admitting to being an inkwell from the age of like 24. It's brutal. So much for the whole I'm an egg sperm on getting women. Now he was saying, because I talk about the negative elements of female nature, all the good women contact me. It's just, dude, stop with your cope. Just, your middle age, it's embarrassing. Yet that's all besides the point. I had brought up maybe 6 months to a year ago the fact that a lot of these right wing males would be better off living in some freezing Siberian hovel in a hut that's poorly heated, and they have a trad wife who never shaves. They work in the fields all day. Their material situation will not change, but everything's in place. It's orderly. You've got the priest, you have to make some donations to the church, you've got the governor, maybe some taxes, you have the Tsar. You don't have to worry about having a mortgage and a car and all this and sending your kids to college. This is too much for your goy to handle by and large. There's a minority of them that are capable of doing it, but for many, they're just not up to snuff. And in such a scenario, let's say the Spurgs you see, the ones that'll make 20 different accounts to harass people because they've got nothing better to do. They would be the village idiots. They would spout off too many times, they get their ass beaten. And that needs to happen to a lot of people in a modern society. But for these fellows who they're always talking about their intelligence, they'd be essentially sitting there going, if I was a rich guy, bitty bitty buddy bitty bitty bum. They're not going to change anything, but they'll be like those fellows that'll be 40 and they're constantly telling you, any moment now, I'm going to hit it big. My brilliance will be recognized. And that would just be in some isolated village. You wouldn't have to see them on Twitter and YouTube always lecturing you on how, because they're too brilliant and intelligent, they've been screwed over by the structures, the powers that be. I mean, imagine how much better of a world we would experience day by day. And let's not forget our friends in the black community. You'll see these Afro libs on YouTube going, Trump's trying to bring back slavery. I'm like, first of all, shut your mouth. Black people are slaves. They're slaves to what the communita thinks. They're slaves to booty. I mean, hell, the term simp came out of the black community. The women are out of control. I was in the grocery store the other day, kind of zoned out, and this light-skinned Keisha, fairly attractive, good shape, but her grill was a little messed up, just approaches me. She's wearing Lilo and Stitch pajamas, and she's lecturing me on Disney movies and how great these are. She keeps mentioning her 5-year-old kid. I'm like, are you trying to case me? You think Marty G is going to be the guy to step up? It's just bizarre. But yeah, brothers are obsessed with cheap imported Chinese goods to flex on men, including younger men. The worst thing you see is when older black guys are trying to talk down to younger ones because they've got these shoes or this silly gold chain. They love buying cars that are unreliable. You know, it was about a week ago, this brother, he has some SUV and the battery's dead. I try to jump it for him. I kid you not. One of the battery terminals is shoved under the dashboard. You can barely reach it. Why would you pay for a product that you can't even work on, that's not reliable? Well, we've mentioned it before, and this is not just with black people. Folks will say all they want, like that weasel on Twitter, the Zoomer one, badum. They'll talk about how clever they are, how they do self-improvement, but they don't want a car shop. They don't want to do their own maintenance. They don't want to have the hassle. They want something they can purchase, and if anything goes wrong, take it to the dealership and it's dealt with. Plain and simple, okay? But we see this constant cycle. Oh, we need to be free. Oh, we need to be in charge of our lives. They don't really want to do all the things that are expected with that because it's annoying, admittedly. It's frustrating. As to the Zoomers, I believe a lot of damage was done by their exposure to, the TikTok and the Instagram of the world because they were raised with this concept you shouldn't really have to work that hard to make money. You can be an influencer, you can shake your ass, do OnlyFans. And they're starting to wake up and smell the instant coffee, which is that may not be sustainable. There's that Chad guy, he does reactions to TikToks, and sometimes it's people, as in Zoomers, who can't get jobs. But then he had one of this kid with puffy hair, and he's going, "Oh, I can't do this office job for 30 years. I need to be outside." Yeah, good luck, dude. Go work on a construction site. You're going to be screaming because some crusty boomer is telling you to, you're taking a few 2 minutes beyond your allotted meal break. And you come across that. Like they're not even able to function in a comfortable, air conditioned environment, making a decent salary. It's too stressful for them. So we did a lot of damage there. Once more, it says the older generations are not doing the proper work. But here you have these Zoomers drifting towards communism because not so much, oh, they want to work on the collective farm. Because that, you say there's some charm and merit to the idea of everyone working on the, was it kolkhoz or kibbutz? But these people don't even want to do that. They think, oh, I'm going to start a collapsitarian channel. I just refuse to work. And so what is the economy going to be? You get some ad revenue and then you distribute it to another content creator with some donations and you just spread the money around like the AI companies are doing. Well, all that it takes is for YouTube to pull the plug on monetization, and these folks are going to have to be put on self-deletion watch in their own room or the basement by their parents. There's also the woman question. So the other day, Goldberg felt like taking a power nap, but of course I couldn't fall asleep. So I went into this coffee shop and I see a Grace Cheng laboring there. She has some blue highlights in the hair. It's like, hey, let me go and talk to her a bit. Her name is something that probably wasn't given by her Asian parents. It looked like one of those you adopt because you want to be different. So it was like a sassafras or sage, chamomile, Earl Grey, paprika, cream of tartar. And that was bad enough, but then underneath it on the name tag, it says they, them. So I'm going, oh, maybe she's just virtue signaling. She is non binary. But then I got to a moment, I go, so if you get with her, does that mean you can't touch her snatch because that's conforming? So you have to, what, bang her up the wee-hee? And generally, you look at her build and you say, I'd say from the gait and the structure and the face, it looks to be probably a biological woman. At the same time, you rice cells, your superpower is that you can pass quite easily. And then you go a step further and you say, okay, let's say you're dating her, you drop her jeans, and she's wearing Fruit of the Loom boxers with a bonus sea cucumber. There was a time when Asians were kind of, you could expect, at least outwardly, they're going to be socially conservative. Now the Asian girls, lathered in tattoos, unnatural hair, embracing LGBT, voting overwhelmingly for communists like Mamdani. So once more, the Goy cannot even control his own daughter. He'll pimp her out at a university. He'll send her like those Australian parents. They let them go backpacking in Laos. They end up dead. Remember when that couple went to Haiti and I was saying, here you got these evangelical Republican parents that should be put in labor camps. And the Wignats going, oh, you just hate Christians. Like, they don't even care about their own people getting wiped out. It's just like, you're not allowed to comment on our stuff. Like some imbecile told me, I'm not allowed to talk about Nick Fuentes. Like, you're allowed to go and suck him off. But what I'm trying to say is that every time they step up in audition, they demonstrate that maybe they don't really, they're not good stewards of all this freedom as much as they idealize it. So you can talk as much as you want about Donald Trump is going to bring in the Great Reset and Klaus Schwab and 15-minute cities and eat the bugs and own nothing and you'll be happy. But when you really look at the Goyim, by and large, what do you see? Well, we can just go back through the video. You have the elderly that are cannibalizing the younger generations. You have those middle generations that they are not able to join together because there's all this, I got to have every box checked on the part of the women. They want to have babies. You got the younger ones that, not all, but large swaths, are incapable of working regular jobs and being productive. They just want to sit there and collect things. So sure, maybe what you're saying at the end of the day is that that's where you belong. You have taken out of your taxes, you get your government provided household, you don't have a car, everything's available, like you live right above the mall, you go and eat your goy slop, you don't get to control your own food, you don't have your own property because, that's too much for you to handle, maintenance and all that. It's too difficult. You don't want to have a mortgage. And if your kids come out, you have maybe max two, they can't get a job, so the government will just cut them some grant check to talk about how terrible the economy is and collapsitarianism on the youtube.com. I mean, you see what I'm trying to say? You can talk all you want about, oh, liberty and this, that, the other, trying to make us slaves, but I see it time and time again. And even when you try to help the Goyim, they slap your hand. They say, oh, you're the cause of this. Well, you can say there's an origin source, but if you're embracing it, if you're not willing to say no to women, if you're not willing to invest in the next generation, maybe the message is we are the hordes, the legions of the next Zila, the inborn slave soul.